Hello, I'm Claire Smith, welcome to my channel. So today I'm going to be trying to find out what is hot right now in the world of fragrance. Which fragrances are the ones that are actually selling right now? And I'm a scientist and I've tried to look at this in a very scientific way, or as scientifically as I possibly could. So if you haven't seen me before, I'm Claire Smith. I make videos all about perfume, perfume science, perfume history, perfume psychology, perfume consumerism, and I also just do some straight perfume reviews as well. So if that kind of content interests you, then please consider subscribing if you haven't done already. And also please like this video if you do end up liking this video. So how have I gone about this? So I thought to myself, well, Sephora sell in a number of different countries around the world. Maybe I can use their websites across different countries. So that sounds great because Sephora sells in the Americas, it sells in Europe, it sells in Asia, and it sells in the Middle East and also in Australasia. So I tried to order the results by best-selling and then pick out the 10 best-selling fragrances for each country in which Sephora sells. But I came across a problem. So for some countries, Sephora don't have the option to filter by best-selling. And that made me wonder why they don't have that option. But yeah, for some countries, I couldn't find that information. So that actually excluded me from finding that information for Australia, for Bahrain, for the UAE, and also for Saudi Arabia, and also for Hong Kong and Malaysia. So actually in this video, the countries that I'm looking at are going to be heavily biased towards the ones in Europe and also to the ones in the Americas, because those were the countries that I could actually find this information for. So the lists I'm going to present in this video are from 10 different countries. And in these lists, I have actually excluded anything that is a body mist or anything that is a hair perfume. My methodology was that I clicked women's perfumes and then I filtered by best selling. So for each of the countries in this video, I'm going to list the top 10 and I'm just going to talk about it. I'm going to say whether I expected these results or not. And I'd just like you to think as well, what do you expect to be the best selling fragrances in your country, in your local Sephoras? Please let me know down below where you come from and what your guess is, because for me, a lot of what I thought was the best selling really wasn't the best selling. And I was quite shocked by some of the results that I saw on these websites. And clearly this video is representing a snapshot. It's representing a snapshot of what was best selling on Sephora's websites around the world at around lunchtime on the 1st of September. So here we go. So first let's look at the UK, and if I look down it's because I'm looking at my notes and I can't possibly remember 10 different fragrances for 10 different countries all in my head, so I'm afraid I'm going to have to look down. So the thing with the UK that really shocked me was that there aren't more Dior fragrances in this list and there aren't any Chanel fragrances at all in this list. And okay, this is a snapshot, so maybe they're just not selling right now, but still in every bestseller list that I've ever seen, it's always been Chanel number 5 that comes up. So maybe it's just the clientele that's at Sephora, or maybe it's the time of year, I'm not sure. But yeah, I was really surprised by the lack of Chanel and the very few Diors that I saw in these lists generally, actually. In the UK, Kayali Vanilla 28 came up as number 1, and I knew Vanilla 28 was quite a successful fragrance, but I didn't realise that it would be number 1. I also didn't really expect there to be so many Tom Fords in the top 10 in Sephora in the UK. Ombre Leather and Tobacco Vanille are unexpected choices to me. If I was going to pick out a Tom Ford that I would think was very likeable, I'd probably go for something like Lost Cherry maybe. So yeah, those two being in this list is surprising to me. I'm not really surprised by J'adore, I'm not really surprised by Good Girl, I'm not surprised by Miss Dior either. But the one that is surprising me, and is number 2 weirdly, is Gucci Bamboo. Gucci Bamboo's been out for ages and I really didn't think that many people wore it. It's really not an instantly likeable fragrance actually. I'm quite surprised that that one is quite so popular. So yeah, thinking about this list, I own 3 of the fragrances here and 4 if you count the old version of Miss Dior. So I guess in a way it isn't that surprising, but it still was quite shocking to me with some of the content of this list. So next let's go on to Spain, and actually the thing about Spain that shocked me really was number 1, and I really wasn't prepared for number 1 at all. So number 1 was Gorgeous Magnolia by Gucci, and that fragrance has only been out, what, 1-2 months? It's really not something that's been on the market for that long, so for that to be the best selling, I guess you would expect it to be selling quite a lot when it's new, but still, for it to be number 1, I'm quite shocked by that. Number 2 also surprised me. So that's a fragrance that I've never heard of before. I've never seen it before. and that's called Layla Lou, and it's by Rosie Jane, and that's supposed to be a peach blossom and green floral fragrance. Not sure, don't know how nice that is, but yeah, that one seems to be popular in Spain. Poem also really surprised me. That's a really old fragrance. That's been out since 1995. There must be a hardcore following for Poem in Spain, maybe. So number 5, Vanilla 28, no surprises there. Number 6 is actually a new and quite bougie Dior fragrance. So that's a special edition of Escal a Portofino that was released only this year. So yeah, wow, bougie Spain. And then, you know, we've got things that we would expect like Good Girl, Idole, My Way. Maybe not Daisy Love by Marc Jacobs though, that's a bit odd. But the one that really shocked me was Maison Margiela Autumn Vibes. And I didn't see any special offer on that fragrance. So maybe people were just sort of, you know, getting in the autumnal mood, 1st September maybe. But yeah, I wouldn't have expected that one either. So on the whole, I'd say that these fragrances are lighter and they are generally a floral kind of fragrance. So that's Spain. So next I looked at Denmark, and I'd say that Denmark is a country that we view in the UK as a place that's Scandi cool. So I was, you know, in my head, in my biased opinions, I was thinking this is going to have independent brands. It's going to be a little bit offbeat, something a little bit different. And actually Denmark didn't disappoint. So the thing that really struck me about the list from Denmark was that it had fragrances in the bestseller list from Floral Street, so a British brand, has 2 in there. It has Sunflower Pop and also Arizona Bloom, which are very summery fragrances, very appropriate for right now. And it also had 2 that I'd never heard of, so I hadn't heard of that Layla Lou fragrance, which was in the Spain's list, and I also hadn't heard of Biotherm's Eau Vitamine A, which I think is a citrus fragrance. So the other thing that really surprised me about this list was that it has 7 Virtues Coconut Sun in the list, which I think came out earlier this year, and I've not seen that on any other list in any other country. So clearly Denmark likes some coconut. I think the thing that really stood out about Denmark as well was that Chanel and Dior are completely absent from this list, and actually YSL have 2 fragrances in the top 10 with Libre and Libre Intense. So yeah, Denmark are a complete mix. So the next country I looked at was Canada, and Canada is a country that made me do a double take with the list because I just didn't believe what I was seeing. I went back and checked this a number of times, and yes, it's correct, but the number 1 best-selling fragrance in Canada on Sephora's website was actually a Juliet Has a Gun fragrance, and it was Musk Invisible. So this fragrance has been out quite a while, and I looked again and I thought, well, why is this? And it said that it was an online exclusive to Sephora. So maybe they are just getting all the sales for that fragrance in that country. Or more suspiciously, maybe Sephora are actually just putting that as number 1 when it isn't the bestseller, maybe because they want to shift it and they want people to see it. I'm not sure, but I found that very, very fishy that was number 1. But it seems like the rest of the choices here are just generally a little bit bougie or very, very popular fragrances. So the other thing that really surprised me, apart from the number 1 in Canada, was the fact that there are so many Dior fragrances in the top 10. So there are 4 Dior fragrances in the top 10. So there's Miss Dior, there's J'adore d'Eau, which has really not been out that long and actually is a water-based fragrance. I wouldn't have expected that one to be a best-selling fragrance, but it is. And then there's also Miss Dior Blooming Bouquet and Hypnotic Poison. Who knew that those fragrances were that popular to get into the top 10? But clearly they are. And then there's just this weird little group of Armani Privé fragrances. Stay bougie, Canada. I really didn't expect those. So there's Tay Yulong, Santal Dansha, and Pivoine Suzu. Yeah, really surprising. And then creeping in at number 10 is Armani C. So yeah, again, in Canada, there's no Chanel fragrances that are listed in the top 10. Why is this? Why is Dior so much more popular than Chanel? I'd really love to know if you've got any inkling whatsoever. Canada was really interesting as well because really in the top 10 there are only 4 different fragrance brands, which really does show that there's a real dominance of the market in Canada for those particular brands. So next let's go to Germany. So Germany is a country I always think of as super cool, and it really didn't disappoint me here. So number 1 in Germany is much like everywhere else in the world, and number 1 was Gorgeous Magnolia, the fragrance that's only been out for a couple of months. So I wasn't surprised by that, having seen the other list. Number 2 was Kayali's Vanilla 28. Again, I wasn't surprised, but I was surprised to see Utopia and also Burning Cherry in the top 10. I had no clue that Kayali was so big in Germany. So the rest of the list is all pretty standard, isn't it? So yeah, they've got two Libres, they've got Libre and Libre Intense, and they've also got Miss Dior and J'adore. I'm not really surprised by those, I've seen those elsewhere. The one that really did surprise me here is Black Opium. I've not seen that on any other list so far. So I think the thing that strikes me about these fragrances is that they're all quite new to the market. There isn't really much here that's over 5 years old, Black Opium and J'adore, but that's really it. All of the rest of them are quite new to the market. So yeah, quite hip and happening again with Germany, much like Denmark was. So next, after Germany, I went and looked at the French Sephora website, and really I thought it's France. It's very associated with fragrances, it's very associated with the perfume industry. This list is going to be entirely French perfume brands, and it wasn't. It really shocked me actually, this list. So the other thing that really shocked me about this list is that the top 5 fragrances are actually almost brand new. They've all been released within the last year or even the last few months. So number 1, Gorgeous Magnolia, which seems to be number 1 everywhere. It just seems to be a best-selling fragrance pretty much around the world at the moment. Number 2, one that I haven't even seen in a shop here yet, which is Rouge Ultime from L'Interdit, from Givenchy. That one really surprised me. J'adore l'Or from Dior, which has just recently been reformulated. That being at number 3 really surprised me because that's only just been released as well. Number 4, Armani C Intense. So this isn't the C Intense that we all know and love. This is a new one that's in a special edition bottle. That's number 4, not the original one. So yeah, again, that's a brand new fragrance, only just released. And then number 5, Guerlain's La Petite Robe Noire Absolue. Also a surprise. I just don't understand how 5 brand new fragrances have crept to the top of this list. Either Sephora are playing me, or this just shows just how much the French have their fingers on the pulse of the perfume market and just want some newness in their life. So yeah, France didn't disappoint me. I really thought there'd be some Chanel on this list, and there's Chanel Coco Mademoiselle coming in at number 6. In fact, the list of number 6 to number 10 is really what I thought I would see on a list of French fragrances, French bestsellers. So we've got Coco Mademoiselle, we've got J'adore, we've got Miss Dior, and then we've got La Vie est Belle. I really expected some Lancôme on the French list. And then number 10 is L'Interdit, so not the flanker, just the original fragrance. So yeah, it's kind of what I expected a little bit, but also not what I expected a little bit as well, with all those new ones at the top there. So yeah, France, clearly just obsessed with new fragrance. So next I went to look at the list for Brazil, and Brazil I always think of as a party nation. I don't know why. It just must be some kind of bias, some kind of stereotyping or something that I've got in my head, but I just always think of Brazil as a very happy and lively place. So really their fragrance choices didn't really disappoint me. There are some party fragrances here, but there's definitely a range of prices here. There's a real spread, and there's also some really old fragrances in the top 10 list. So number 1 for Brazil was La Vie est Belle by Lancôme. I'm not entirely surprised by that. It's been a bestseller all around the world. In fact, I'm more surprised that I'm not seeing it in more of these lists. But yeah, La Vie est Belle was number 1. There's also YSL Libre, which we've seen in many, many lists so far. But the real shocks for me were 212 VIP Rosé by Carolina Herrera. That fragrance is really quite old now, and I'm really surprised to see that one. As I am Cacharel's Amour Amour, I think that fragrance came out in 2003, and that's a really super cheap fragrance as well. It's a really affordable one, and it's very, very sweet, that one as well. Chloe EDP is also quite an old fragrance. I think that came out in 2008. And yeah, there's Angel Dimon by Givenchy at number 8. That's also quite an old one. That came out in 2006. So yeah, 3 really quite old fragrances in this list. There's also L'Interdit, as we've seen in other lists, Idole and Paradox. So yeah, there's a really good mix of price points and also of old and new in this list. And again, there's a real lack of Chanel. There's nothing Chanel here in this list. And weirdly, there's nothing from Dior either. So yeah, that's the list for Brazil. So next I checked the Polish website of Sephora, and actually Poland have some really strange choices, but number 1 is a fragrance I've seen in many, many lists around the world, and that is that Gucci Flora fragrance again. It's the Gorgeous Magnolia one that's only just been released. But really the rest of the list I would not have guessed. So number 2, a random Lady Million flanker that's been new out this year, I think. Number 3, a fragrance I'd never ever heard of, a very bougie Chloe fragrance, Atelier des Fleurs Ilang Kananga. Number 4, a Chanel, but not really a Chanel that I would have expected. I guess Eau Fraiche might be one that they may be choosing because it's summertime, maybe. Maybe that's why it's in the bestsellers right now. But yeah, that's not a fragrance that I would generally think of as a top 10 bestseller. Then number 5, again, Juliet Has a Gun. Number 6, Galan. And then number 8, Acqua di Parma. Wow. Number 7, Hugo Boss is Sent for Her. That's quite an old fragrance. But yeah, I wouldn't expect that one to be in a top 10 bestseller either. And Clean Reserve, I didn't realise that one was popular, the Seguro Blossom and Sand fragrance. Just a really very surprising list actually from Poland. And a lot of these I haven't tried actually. Number 10 being Angel, I'm not entirely surprised by her because I think Angel is loved in particular countries around the world, but I didn't realise that Poland loved Angel, but clearly they do love Angel. So yeah, there's some delicate light florals here, there's some herbal woody fragrances and some leathery rose musk fragrances, like the Musk Noble fragrance. So yeah, there's a real mix in the choices for Poland, and I really couldn't have guessed most of that list apart from maybe number 1, having seen the other lists. So next I looked at the bestsellers in Italy, and actually Italy is a country with its own fragrance industry. It has the Euritalia conglomerate brand that has Moschino and also has Versace, and it also has Gucci. So I was thinking maybe it's going to support its home brands here. But actually, number 1 is just exactly the same as it is in many other European countries again. So it's actually that gorgeous magnolia fragrance again. It must be doing so well, that fragrance from Gucci. So the rest of the list, we've seen some of these in other lists and some of them we haven't seen. So Givenchy L'Interdit I'm not really surprised by, but I am surprised that it's number 2. J'adore by Dior we've seen in other lists as well, and Miss Dior we've seen again repeatedly. Hypnotic Poison we've seen a few times as well. Kayali Vanilla at number 8 is not a surprise. That seems to sell quite well in most countries. Libre Intense we've seen on other lists as well. That's a relatively new fragrance. The one that really stood out to me, or the 2 that really stood out to me really on this list, were Black Orchid from Tom Ford. I really didn't expect to see that on any bestseller list in any country. And also Alien is at number 7, which I also didn't expect to see, having not seen much from Mugler on any list, apart from that Angel that was its bestseller in Poland. So yeah, Italy kind of strikes me as a bit of a dark, mysterious, playful, perfume-wearing country with its choices of Hypnotic Poison, Alien, and also Black Orchid. Really quite surprising choices there, especially Black Orchid. And weirdly, there's no Chanel again. I don't understand how Chanel is just not more popular on these lists. Maybe people buy their Chanel fragrances in store. Maybe that's why they're not on the Sephora website as bestsellers. I have no idea. So the final list that I looked at was the one for the US, and really the list for the US didn't surprise me much apart from how the Canadian list had surprised me. So the Canadian list had Juliet Has a Gun, Musk Invisible at the top of its list, and the US also has that one at the top of its list. And again, this was a online exclusive to Sephora, so maybe it was the case that this fragrance was just being only bought from Sephora in that country, and that's what pushed it up the list. Or maybe more sort of suspiciously, maybe perhaps Sephora aren't being totally honest with which of their best-selling fragrances. I don't know, but I just can't imagine Musk Invisible being a bestseller on their website. It's just quite a different kind of fragrance to me to be a bestseller. It's not a mass appealing one. I wouldn't have said Musk Invisible. So number 2 to 4, I'm really not surprised about. They're very likeable, very easygoing fragrances, very popular fragrances. So Good Girl, Valentino Donna Born in Roma, and then Versace Bright Crystal, I think is a fragrance that is really popular in the US. And it's one of those bright, sparkly, easygoing summer ones, isn't it? So I guess if it was the bestseller list on the 1st of September, that makes perfect sense because it's still kind of quite warm weather, quite summery. Number 5, Glossier You, that's one of my favourite fragrances, and I think that Glossier You is something that's probably a lot more popular in the US than elsewhere around the world because Glossier is an American brand, and I think that's really where that fragrance has been dominant sort of traditionally. Number 6 is a brand new one, so Burberry Goddess has definitely been causing waves, and I'm not surprised that that one was number 6 because really I've seen YouTube video after YouTube video of people having bought that one, so clearly that one's been exciting people. Number 7, Libre. Again, that's one I see a lot of American YouTubers talk about, a lot of people from the US talk about. 8, Vanilla 28, that's popular everywhere. Miss Dior's also popular everywhere. Aqua de Joya at number 10, I really wouldn't have imagined, but I think that fragrance just isn't that popular in the UK, but it is quite popular in the US. So yeah, there's a real range there. There's some really easygoing, likeable ones, and then there's some really random ones that I'm really not sure should be there, like Juliet Has a Gun, Musk Invisible at number 1. But who knows? Is Musk Invisible really that popular in the US? Please let me know down below. So yeah, those are the top 10 seller lists for those different countries. I'm really sorry that I couldn't get more varied countries around the world. That really wasn't my intention. I really wanted to get some Asian countries. I really wanted to get Australia, New Zealand, and just sadly I couldn't. I also wanted some Middle Eastern countries as well in this list for a bit of diversity, because this is just a very Americas and very Europe based list, and it's just not really a worldwide look at this, really, is it? It's a bit sad that Sephora don't allow me to sort their other websites by best selling, and it really makes me wonder why that is. It really makes me wonder whether Sephora have got some deals going on with some brands so that they appear first on their websites in those countries, and that deal means that they don't provide those bestseller lists because they don't want to detract from people clicking on the top ones on the other pages. Maybe there's some kind of feedback to whether they're paid or not. I don't know, but yeah, that's what makes me think. It makes me think that there's some kind of deal going on with brands. I think the other thing that shocked me about these lists was that when I was making them, body sprays were really, really popular. So the ones that kept coming up again and again and again in these lists, and actually had 6 in the top 10 in the US list, was Sol de Janeiro. I didn't realise just the huge popularity of those body sprays. And actually, Sol de Janeiro 62 was actually the biggest seller in the UK as well. And that shocked me. But ironically, in Brazil, there weren't any body sprays in the top 10. So I guess Sol de Janeiro is perhaps not the most authentic of brands, perhaps, to the Brazilian ideal. But yeah, certainly popular in other countries. Clearly, this study is flawed. I would say my own suspicions lead me to believe that the number 1 position is perhaps a paid for position in particular countries. So, for example, in Europe and also in the US and Canada, the same fragrance was at number 1, because I can't imagine that the same fragrance, and quite odd fragrances really, ones I wouldn't have ever imagined, are at number 1 in those countries, across all of those countries, all at the same time. That just seems rather suspicious to me. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's what I think. The other thing that really stood out with these lists was just the fact that certain fragrances come up again and again. So Kayali's Vanilla 28 just seems like it's gone completely nuts. It feels like it's, it's got huge traction on the fragrance market. It's a really popular fragrance. Even 5 years out after release, this is still in multiple top 10 bestseller lists across the world, which is really, really amazing for Kayali. The other thing that really struck me was the lack of Chanel fragrances in most of these lists. And actually the Chanel fragrance that I thought would be really popular, which is Coco Mademoiselle, I think we only saw it in the French list. So that really surprised me. And the other thing that really surprised me was just the dominance of Dior over Chanel. I thought it would be completely the other way around. But clearly Miss Dior is doing something right, because that was in a lot of lists. I guess Miss Dior is a fragrance that gets refreshed occasionally. It was reformulated in 2021. Maybe that keeps its traction going, keeps it attracting a new audience, and keeps the sales up for that brand. I'm not sure. But yeah, this has just been a really interesting exercise, and I hope you've enjoyed it. And if you have enjoyed it, then please press the like button, and please also consider subscribing if you haven't done already. And please let me know down below what you think of these lists and what surprised you. I'd be really interested to find out your views on this and what you think about what's the bestseller in your country and whether you think that's right or not. So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.